I'm going to be joined on stage now by Stephen Hardwick, Director of Corporate Communications, HM Revenue and Customs for Her Majesty's Government. At AMEC, we're unequivocal about this. We regard the UK Government Communications Service as both a partner and a standard bearer to demonstrate the importance and the relevance and the value of measurement. But Stephen will tell you, getting it right within government didn't just happen by accident. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Barry. This is the third year in a row that the Government Communications Service from the UK has been invited to speak at this summit. So I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of the GCS to share our experiences, the challenges and achievements as we sought to become world-class exemplars of government communications. And I want to tell you about how we've gone about it across government, but also particularly in how we've done it in HMRC, the nation's favourite tax collector, because we are a really, really big operational organisation, and so we have different requirements than other government departments which may be policy only, and they're looking at the views and opinions of policy. We're actually trying to get people to do stuff, i.e. pay us more than £500 million a year in tax revenues. Role of government comms. Communication is considered to be one of the four levers of government in the UK. The others are legislation, regulation and taxation. And the role of effective comms in government is simply to help the government to achieve its objectives and its priorities. And those for this government are saving or enriching people's lives, providing economic security for every stage of your life, protecting our national security to keep our country safe, extending opportunity so that everyone has the chance, everyone has a chance to get on in life, and delivering for Britain to ensure the smooth running of government and public services. And this last one is particularly apposite to HMRC. Government communications only exists to support the delivery of the government's objectives. There shouldn't be any communication for the sake of communicating, and there is so much to communicate about, and an awful lot of us who are doing it. So government comms has around 4,000 people across 17 central government departments and 330 other public bodies. The salary costs alone for these 4,000 communications officers is around £150 million a year. And on top of this, we spend up to £300 million a year on more than 200 campaigns. In 2010, when there was a change of government, we were spending 3 times as much as that. And yet we couldn't properly explain to the incoming government whether all of those people and all of that money that was being spent was making a difference, and whether what we were doing was value for money and we were spending money effectively. I'm sure some of you have seen this before. I like it very much because this quote from John Wanamaker sums up the problem we faced in 2010, and sometimes we still do. It's not that we didn't believe that we were adding value, it's just that we had no hard evidence to prove that we were doing so. Because we didn't properly measure and evaluate the work of government communications. And as a consequence, at times of austerity, our budgets were slashed, the role of communications came under very, very close scrutiny. This was happening in the context of a fast-changing media landscape and rapidly evolving media consumption patterns for our audiences. And our audiences in government is everybody, every single person in the country, and every charity, every business. Given the scale of the costs involved, the fact that we couldn't measure this is quite shocking. But it's not uncommon, as you all know, in the communications profession, whether in the public sector or the private sector, to spend an awful lot of money without really knowing what value it adds. For me in HMRC, I joined in 2011, I had quite a lot of pressure. We had 67,000 staff at that point, and they serve 49 million individual customers and more than 5 million businesses. We're basically the biggest customer organisation in the country, if you can believe it. In 2010, we were set some really stretching targets by the government. and that was to bring in an awful lot more money, but to do so at an effective efficiency of 16% per annum. Because we had these cost savings, some of the fundamental questions that my department had were, are we spending the right money on the right people in this department? And I had 380 people when I joined HMRC in working in communications, and there's a very clear choice. Should we be spending money on people doing comms, or should we spend money on tax inspectors? And obviously in an organisation like HMRC, the leaning is towards employing tax inspectors and not to employing people working in communications. I knew that we were too big, and I wanted to be able to resize my function as I saw fit to deliver on the objectives of the department. In order to do that, I needed some evidence. I needed to be able to demonstrate that my function adds value to the department. And comms isn't just the icing on the cake, but we were fundamental to the functions of HMRC in getting people to pay their tax on time and in exposing tax cheats and discouraging people from becoming non-compliant. In a department which is as heavily reliant on data and evidence as HMRC, I couldn't rely just on guesswork and assertion. So I needed data, I needed evidence, and that meant using the same sorts of measurement and evaluation that my colleagues in the tax world were using to say how much money they were bringing in and the effectiveness of the campaigns that they were running against tax avoidance and tax evasion. We were measuring stuff. Across government we were measuring stuff, but we weren't always measuring the right stuff. And what we were measuring was outputs and outtakes, and we certainly weren't measuring outcomes or impacts. So press officers, for instance, were measuring the output, how many press releases were issued, how many column inches they secured in national newspapers, how many broadcast minutes they secured on radio and television. And at its worst, we just heard about it, across the comms industry, we were measuring AVE. Social media was measured in the number of Twitter and Facebook followers and the notional reach. Advertising was measured on the recall, awareness of marketing campaigns, and internal comms was measured on the number of hits on internet stories. We still measure most of this, not the AVE stuff, because it is useful insight, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient. And we've just talked about the Barcelona principles, got it on the table. Very, very different from what we were doing in 2010. And the big things that we were missing out: smart communications objectives linked to clear business goals. We heard that just earlier about the proportion of organisations that set about doing comms without working out what their goal is first. Secondly, the policy or business outcomes, not just the outputs and outtakes from communications. And third, the impacts on the business of those outcomes. In HMRC and across government, we were setting communications objectives which were not directly linked to the business objectives of the organisations that we worked for and that they were seeking to achieve. We were setting activities as objectives and measuring the reach of those activities rather than measuring the outcomes and impacts of those activities on our policy or our organisational goals. So when I joined HMRC, I put a new comms strategy together that was clearly focused on the business priorities and where our activities could add value. And we developed a performance hub, and that measured the business performance hubs that my executive director colleagues have in their meeting rooms that measure real stuff. And we measure and monitor a wide range of inputs, outputs, outtakes, and outcomes. And we can now clearly demonstrate correlations between our communications activity and the business objective we're supporting. And that means we can also demonstrate the return on investment of our communication spending. We still measure awareness, we still measure Twitter engagement because they're useful outtakes, but we don't communicate just to make people aware. We communicate to make people do something. So I'm going to give you some real-life examples from campaigns that we run. Self-assessment for those who are fortunate enough to earn more than £100,000 or unfortunate enough to have complex tax affairs. 11 million people in the UK have to fill in a tax self-assessment return and get it to us by the 31st of January. Now, this is a campaign that we've been running over the last 8 years, and we've reduced it in cost year by year from 6 million to just 1.3 million pounds this year. For this campaign, we measure clear business objectives, and those are in terms of the number of people who must complete their returns by the deadline, because those who miss the deadline often owe us tax, and it costs us money to chase them to get it from them. We measure the proportion of those who file online, because the cost to us of processing digital returns is a fraction of the cost of processing paper. And thirdly, we measure the number of people who call our helplines, because it costs an average £5, depending on the length of the call, to handle a phone call. So the fewer calls we get, the less it costs us to run the self-assessment. And lower demand also means we can answer the phones faster, which improves our core customer service metric for the personal tax part of the business, for customer services, of speed of response and the proportion of calls that we answer first time. So our comms objectives and our success and failure are absolutely nailed on the business objective. This year, I'm very pleased to say, with our lowest ever spend, we had a 3 percentage point increase in the proportion of customers who filed online to 89%. We're getting close to saturation point. And we had 500,000 fewer phone calls, which is a real monetary saving and an improvement in the performance of our call centres, because those 500,000 calls were being answered, other calls were being answered faster. Now, we have to apply the same rigour to everything we do in comms in HMRC to ensure we're focused on supporting the business objectives. And we've been part of the government effort to spread this improved rigour right across government comms. So we have a programme of communications reform that we've been running for the last 3 years that aims to increase the capability, efficiency and effectiveness of communications and demonstrate that government communications represents good value for money for the taxpayer. We've put a number of key building blocks in place. Those include a new evaluation competency framework for staff and a 3-tier training course at foundation, practitioner and advanced levels to improve staff capability. We've established a network of evaluation champions, advanced practitioners from every department who can promote best practice, and I think some of them are in the room here today. All government departments should now have established a performance hub, like the one I have in HMRC. Some of these are physical. I have it on my wall because I like to look at stuff and pull something off the wall and show people. Others have it virtually accessible through their IT systems. But what they all do is provide metrics that help us to track our performance of our communications activities and the campaigns we're running. We've also set up an evaluation council. This brings people from government communications together with academics, expert practitioners, and from data-driven companies like Facebook and Google. Some of the members of the council are in the room today. I've already seen David Rockland, Neil Holy, and of course your chair-elect Richard Bagnall, and there might well be others in the room who I just haven't spotted yet, who are part of the council. And we use this council to improve our own understanding of developments in communications evaluation, but also as a forum for practitioners in government comms to come to seek advice and challenge. It's a little like the X Factor for evaluation. And in fact, Professor Jim McNamara has referred to what we've done in his latest book, Organisational Listening, as creating an evaluation factor. We also established 2 important frameworks. The first is a campaigns framework called OASIS, which stands for Objective Audience Insights, Strategy, Implementation, and, just to make it nice and neat, scoring, by which of course we mean evaluation. We wanted a simple framework that would help comms teams to understand and measure the component parts of the campaign. I've already spoken about the need to align communications to policy and business objectives. Audiences is about understanding who the audience is, where they are, and how best to reach them. It's about demographics, geography, media consumption habits, social media use, and any other behavioural insights that we can gather. This insight will then inform our strategy, which channels we should use, how to use them, when to use them, whether we can run a zero-cost campaign using media and social media, or a low-cost campaign, a low-cost digital and advertising campaign, or go the whole hog for a full-blown TV, radio advertising campaign. It also helps us to decide whether we should run a campaign at all, or to try to reach our audiences through other routes. So in HMRC, for instance, that might mean sending them letters directly, and asking them to go online and to do something, or it might be through trusted third parties, through partnership marketing. An insight doesn't just help us to target our communications effectively, it also gives us evidence to push back against those in our organisation who come to us without any insight at all, demanding specific comms products. Can we have a poster campaign? We want some radio ads. Can you do a YouTube website, YouTube video? Because our clients in our organisation tend to start at the glitzy end because they've got some sort of objective to raise awareness, and so can we have this product please? They don't come with the audience insights that tell us which is the best route, which is the best channel, which is the best product to reach those audiences. Implementation is about putting a clear plan and timetable in place, allocating the resources and running the activities, and then this brings us to scoring or evaluation, in which we encourage our communicators to think about at the very beginning, not at the end of the project. I'll whiz through this quite quickly. The new evaluation framework, which we launched last year, which Richard and others in the Evaluation Council have been really helpful in refining for us. It's based on the Barcelona principles, and this framework, I think, is as good as we're going to get anywhere, certainly in government communications. And it adopts an integrated approach to communications evaluation, looking across all channels, because our audience obviously don't absorb communications in silos. So we've got a range of measures for different audiences and channels, for media, digital marketing, stakeholder engagement, and internal communications, and a really handy glossary at the back that helps us to understand what things like penetration, sentiment, and reach are. We've made it as simple as possible for our staff to make it easy for them to use. We've made a swatch out of it, like a colour swatch for paints, which they can keep on their desk. And obviously coming tomorrow, you've got your brand new WYSI online interactive framework, which we're very much looking forward to seeing that Richard and his team are introducing. And it's very, very closely aligned to that. So yours is a step on, and we're going to be using that in anger from 4 o'clock tomorrow, I very much hope. This looks horrible. It's not. It's very simple, and this is one of the slides from my evaluation hub, and this is for the tax credits campaign, because we do a big campaign at this time of year where there are 6 million families who are entitled to tax credits. We need them to renew, to update their details, let us know if their circumstances have changed. And our campaign is very simple. It's trying to get people to do it on time and online. Our message in our campaign is, your life isn't 9 to 5, so neither are we. Renew online anytime. This slide was updated weekly, and it shows how many people are renewing and whether they're renewing by phone, by post, or online. At the very bottom, what we've got is those tiny little icons. That's when each of the different channels are brought in, whether it's television, out of home, Twitter, press, radio, and vertically, you can see in the middle is the proportion of the renewals that are done online by post and phone. The bottom segment, if you can just about see it, the blue one, is the proportion who are renewing online. And at the top, we're measuring the number of people who are renewing, and then, by each of these different methods and how it was last year. And what's interesting with this, because this is a weekly update that we have in the hub, is you can see when the television came on, which is the second line now at the bottom, that there was an immediate spike in online renewals. And in the last week, we had more than 50% of the renewals, and this is the biggest chunk of renewals we get at any time, and they were online. The television and the out-of-home we put on the end drove that spike. What we have daily, and this is an example from this year, is a dashboard that tells us what's going on today. The top right, it tells us the proportion of people who filed online so far. What's interesting is at the bottom, which you can't read, but there are the top 10 reasons for people contacting us, the top 5 reasons for people phoning us, and the top 5 reasons for people contacting us via web chat. That's fed into my press office every day, and so as soon as we see what those reasons are, we start posting on Facebook and Twitter the answers to the questions that people are asking about. So this is showing how absolutely interdependent and codependent the operation of the business is with the communications, and we're using live operational data to guide our communications daily, hourly, to help to drive people online to serve themselves rather than to pick up the phone or even to be with us in web chat. So, just to conclude, we've come quite a long way in government since 2010, when we couldn't demonstrate the value of what we did for the nearly £1 billion a year that we were spending on communications. We now have a strong evaluation framework. We're moving beyond this to make measurement and evaluation mainstream and mandatory across the government communication service. We've got a much stronger focus on smart business objectives and outcomes. We have training and knowledge sharing through our evaluation champions. We've embedded best practice. We have a peer review of experts through the Evaluation Council. We're exploring ways to improve organisational listening with Jim McNamara. And finally, we can demonstrate our value to government with hard evidence in a way we never could before. We brought rigour to UK government communications campaign planning and evaluation. We've still got a long way to go to ensure that everybody in all 4,000 of our communications officers across government understand and are using this. But the progress we've made over the last 3 years has been integral to raising the professionalism, respect and influence of government communications in the UK, and particularly among ministers. Everything I've talked about is available on the GCS website, so if there are things you want to have a look at, go in, help yourselves and have a look around. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Some great stuff there. Actually, Stephen, could you flick back 2 slides? Yeah, next one back. Let me lead off while other people think of their question. What was the start point for you? Was the start point to get the experts through the Evaluation Council to help guide and shape you what you wanted to do? Or was the first step, thinking back, the inner intent of the government communications service to make measurement matter?
The start point was the latter. It was to start to measure the right things, because across government we were all under threat. And for me, as I said, I came in 380 people, way too many people in communications, way too much money being spent, and knowing what was the right amount of money and the right number of people. And building our own hub, which we did, I think within 3 months of my arrival. Paul and Joko, somewhere in the room, was responsible for putting the first government communications hub up, and then moved on to DWP and did one for them, and then moved into Cabinet Office, and has been leading this through Cabinet Office. We then saw the benefit of seeking outside help and getting free advice from the best experts that we could get our hands on, both in the UK and internationally. And so we set up the Evaluation Council. Interestingly, the model of the Evaluation Council has then since been replicated for social media, for digital, and it's been replicated again for what we call a Futures Council, where we're thinking about what's coming next across. And so this is, for us, the integration between government and experts in the private sector has been fabulously beneficial. First off, we needed to do something because ministers came in 2010 and said, why are you spending all this money? What are you spending it on? And my predecessors and Alex Aitken's predecessors said, well, we don't really know. And so we thought we ought to do something about it.
Okay. So I'm coming out to the room for questions for Stephen. I mean, it's a great case study of proving the value of communications by investing and committing to measurement. So hand up towards the back there. Yeah.
Hello? Is this working? Can you hear me?
No, can't hear you.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I wanted just to say I thought that the observation is kind of upstream of measurement, but kind of actually when you're deciding the business objectives, you then agree what comms cocktail to put together to meet the objective was actually very elegant and actually probably something a lot of organisations think about but don't do very well. My question was actually about that because I do think it's interesting. What is the brain behind that? Because if you sort of break down marketing into all the different disciplines, each person knows their area of expertise, but agreeing as a group who does what in terms of proportion to meet that objective is often difficult. So I just wondered if you could explain a little bit how that in practice works.
Well, in HMRC, I've got two communications operations really. I've got a corporate communications operation with media marketing, internal comms that does all of the outreach, and I've got embedded communications teams who work for each of the operational parts of the department, and we operate together as a single leadership structure. And so we sort of work as corporate comms both as master and slave. At times we determine what there should be, and at other times we are the service provider, like a consultancy to the business. And so the head of communications in what was personal tax, safe and self-assessment, would come with the business objectives and the insights from the operational part of the business. These are 11 million customers, this is where they are, this is roughly where they are in the country, bring all of that insight, and then commission from corporate communications an integrated communications plan, which he would be responsible for delivering as the client through all of our different teams. We would require that head of comms to go to the business and get the metrics that we need to help us plan the right communications campaign with an outside planner. And he'd also be digging into other bits that might be useful. So I didn't show you a slide where we tracked the speed of answer of phone call against online. And last year, the slower we answered the phone, the more people went online. As soon as we started to answer the phone faster, people stopped doing it themselves until the very last week. And so there's an issue there for the department. Our reputation can be trashed on the fact that we don't answer the phone quickly, and we've had that quite a lot. On the other hand, when we don't answer the phone really quickly, people will go online and serve themselves. What's the right balance? What's the right length of time? But we could see from the data that would be provided to us what the impact of different changes in the operational performance were having on the way that people were contacting us and what they were doing. So it's a truly collaborative effort, but what we do in our embedded comms system is require those teams to work very closely with the operational part of the business, while we sort of sit a bit aloof from that because we're serving them. They give us the data, they give us the insight, they give us the performance stuff, and then we will help to change the campaign that we're running from the centre.
Okay, thank you. So we've got time for one more question. Is there a hand up? Yep. Ben Levine from Ketchum.
Thank you. Kind of a two-part question. Do you know any other governments around the world that have adopted the same rigorous approach to measurement? And related to that, what advice would you give to the public or private sector to kind of really drive the change in thinking and adoption of measurement the way it's happening in government communications?
Sorry, I missed part of the last bit. What was the last bit?
What advice, because I was really impressed, when you talked, I think that it was really impressive the way you talked about the journey and the top-down, it seemed to be a top-down, probably bottom-up approach, but the way it just, you were able to push it through the organization. So what advice would you give to other organizations, public or private, to help make that transformation?
Okay. The answer to the first question is, personally, I don't know. Richard, have other government departments, other governments in other countries been doing this sort of thing? I know, I feel instinctively that we are ahead of the curve. Richard and I were in Oslo a few months ago speaking at a conference, and there were people from government there, and so they were clearly starting to do it, but I don't think they're anywhere near as advanced as we are.
I think that's right. I think they're keen to learn from the work that you guys have been doing. I think, Barry, is it not right that we're putting together a group or connecting governments? We're looking to do that through AMEC as well, so that they can benefit from that work.
And my answer to the second question, whether it's public or private sector, it's important to have communications in the room where the decisions are made about operations. So I'm on the executive committee of HMRC and sit with the DGs who run the business. My heads of communications in the operational parts of the business report directly to their DG and sit in the leadership team, and so they're in the room when decisions are made, and they're able then, therefore, to have that influence. If you're trying to do communications via a third party, where you're not there when the operational decisions are taken, you can't influence how those operations are run, and you can't change things for the better. So, very simple example, we might send out 10 million letters to a customer base. Unless they come to communications first, they're likely to be legally correct, technically accurate, and unintelligible. So we have inserted ourselves into the operation of how we communicate with customers. You might have seen something in the press a couple of days ago, those in the UK. We're slightly mocked by the Daily Telegraph for admitting that we've started thanking customers for paying their tax on time when we send them letters. Because basic courtesy, thanks for all the money it's paying for public services, costs nothing. But our technical colleagues, our policy colleagues, would never have thought of that because it's a legal obligation. Why should we thank anybody? Or say please. And so being there, being in the room, really, really helps to drive changes in how things are done, which then makes our job easier in doing it.
Reluctantly, we're going to leave it there. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today.